You're listening to the Anthem Award-winning podcast from Rutgers Law School, The Power of Attorney. I'm your host and Dean of the Law School, Joanna Bond. Today, I have the great privilege of speaking with two wonderful individuals. One, former Chief Judge in Newark and Executive Director of Odyssey Impact, Judge Victoria Pratt. And along with Judge Pratt, I have Bianca Hernandez, a 2L at Rutgers Law School. So I'm absolutely thrilled to have both of you on the podcast today. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Of course.
Thank you for inviting us.
Of course. It's my pleasure. So you all have a fantastic story, and I'm eager to get into the story a little bit, but I'm going to begin with Judge Pratt. Could you tell us a little bit about your origin story?
You know, it's such a funny question to ask, because as I begin to map out my origin story, I realize that it is almost it's a triangle in the city of Newark that doesn't begin at my mother's beauty salon, but it starts at what was known as West Street, which is what Prudential now sits on. It goes back down the street to 15 Washington, which is what I affectionately call PS15 when I went to Rutgers Law School in Newark. And then it darts back out to 31 Green Street, and actually even Broad Street before there. And how decisions and observations and experiences in those places have led me to where I am right now. And I don't know if there are many people who can say that kind of, maybe it's not a triangle, but that those 3 points have allowed them to not just impact policies and practices nationally, but internationally. And so what's important to know about me is that I'm the daughter of an African-American garbage man who was born in Harlem and spent his summers in the segregated South. I am also the daughter of a Dominican beautician who came to this country for a better life for her unborn children. My parents were insistent that they taught and that their children treat everyone they met with dignity and respect, no matter how they looked, spoke, or behaved. And how important those lessons would be when I subsequently became the chief judge in Newark Municipal Court. One of the things I think that is also important to know, is that as a young child, I decided that I was going to change the world when I grew up. And there was no one who could dissuade me that I could not do this thing, change the world. That's easy. Happens all the time.
Right.
And I started making decisions about how I was going to do that. And I remember I was terrified of applying to law school. I didn't think I was smart enough to be a lawyer. Who am I to do that? And one summer, I decided that when I was going back to college, Rutgers, New Brunswick, so I'm a Rutgers Jersey girl, I decided that I was going to become a literacy volunteer for, I think it's Literacy Volunteers of America, that's right there they used to be on University. And the trainings happened at the law school building. And as I walked into the law school building at the time, in the old building, all of the class pictures were on the walls. And, you walk in and it's usually old white males. Then there would be a couple of women, and then you would see some people of color, depending on where you were walking. And something about that experience, just being able to walk into the building and talk. And we took our sessions, our training sessions were at the library. And I was like, you know what? I think I can do this. And the mantra that has really guided my life and my decision-making has been the what ifs. I am more afraid of living with what ifs than I am any fear that could try to attach itself to my dreams. Any fear is always outsized by the idea of living with the what if I had just applied? What if I had just shown up? What if I had just spoken up? What if I had just worked on this idea? So all of that, I end up going back, studying for the LSAT. I eventually get into Rutgers, and it is exactly where I need to be for the training that I need to go out and change the world.
That's fantastic. Can I ask you to say a little bit more about why you chose Rutgers and why you say that looking back now?
Well, again, Rutgers was the building that was like, you need to come here. Being in this space, it was the place that I had seen growing up, catching the bus. And it's sometimes you don't see things in life until you need to see them. It was just this
Right.
building that I didn't think was for me. And then I started to understand the history of Rutgers, how during the riots, people came there and insisted that people like me were admitted. And these weren't folks who were trying to go to the law school, had no intention of benefiting directly. And once I got there, I was like, everything that is in me gets to be a part of my practice. And Rutgers taught me that I could unleash my upbringing, my experiences with injustice, being the firstborn English speaking child in a family. And even if you're not in that family, you're required to translate and understand paperwork that you're like, how would I know how to translate this work? Well, you better figure it out. All of that made sense. And so wanting to use the law to make the world more equitable for folks who were like me. And Rutgers was like, this is how we do it. This is how we unleash you on the world. So whether it was the clinics, like I was a part of the inaugural class of the community law clinics, and why it's so important. That's what's so special, I think, about one of the many things that's special about Rutgers, but that the clinics actually put students into spaces working with people so that it's not just theory, so that it's not just policy, but that they understand this is how you take the law and apply it. And
Mhm.
not just in social justice. I took an entertainment law class at Rutgers, and then I went to intern at a record company. And it was fascinating that I had just learned something in class that I then saw in a contract. And I said, oh, if they had done this, this would have looked differently.
That's amazing. That's exactly how it's supposed to work. That's
That's exactly
great.
it. That's exactly it.
Well, can you tell me a little bit about your experience in the MSP program?
Oh, I am of the hashtag, no, there would be no me without MSP.
That's wonderful.
That is a hashtag, and I am a proud member of the sorority fraternity that exists. It was truly a life-changing experience because it provided support, it provided camaraderie, and not to the exclusion of my white colleagues in school. Like that's what was so special about it. It wasn't to the exclusion of them. It was about supporting me so that I could get to this place to then go into the practice with everything that I needed. And I think that was best illustrated. I was recently honored a couple years ago by the Alumni Association, and classmates of mine had actually taken out they took out an ad congratulating me. And what was beautiful about it was that some of the classmates, I fought with them all the time in law school. Some of them were Federalists. I was like,
Right.
really? You're proud?
That's wonderful.
Yes. And on social media, really feeling connected to any success that I've had. So the MSP program was really important because without it, a student like myself, who grew up in a family with parents with eighth grade educations, would not have had an opportunity to go into the world and to do the things that I do and help other judges and help prosecutors and help officers really create change in a justice system so that it's more equitable. So that is why a part of me just is pained by these decisions, the decision by the Supreme Court, because it will mute out people who are meant to go into the world and do things. And then we have all these standards that keep them out of schools. So
Right. Your story is remarkable and so inspiring. So thank you so much for sharing that. Uh, I want to shift gears a little bit and ask you to just mention briefly how you think that all of this training through the law school and through the MSP program helped to prepare you for your role as chief judge in Newark's municipal court?
Well, I was unafraid. I was unafraid to address the things that I saw. So it wasn't just looking at the law, I was seeing people holistically. And so I had been trained, I had already been doing it. I had been working at the housing authority when I was a law student, looking at those three strikes and people getting kicked out of housing. So what I understood was that when grandma gets kicked out of housing, that can impact four generations of families because they live with grandma in public housing. So now I'm a judge and this person's about to plead guilty to something or get sent to jail. And I'm understanding how this impacts generationally this one family.
Right.
And so I didn't separate those things as a judge. I had an understanding and had to get to this information and also had to be impacted by what else could we do and whether or not what we always did was the right thing to do. Because just because you have jail as an option doesn't mean that you always have to use it. And sometimes, it's easier to just send somebody to jail as opposed to dealing with all the stuff that you really need to. It's not easier for them, but it gives you cover as a person who has some authority in that courtroom if you don't want to have to deal with what happens if I let this person out, but what happens if I give them services and we get this family some help. So those were questions that had been kind of put in, and I can't say my DNA, but I had been trained to ask them. And when I got on the bench, I didn't stop asking those questions just because now I'm a judge. And I think that's one of the problems we have. You have this good training, you become a judge, and you just do this thing this one way, and that's a waste of an opportunity. So
Right.
it's seeing and it's understanding community, it's understanding people and the broader range of issues that appear in a courtroom.
It's wonderful that you can bring that life experience to bear on the cases that you were deciding. That's incredible. Now I want to shift gears and talk a little bit to Bianca. Bianca, can you tell us about your origin story?
Yes. So every time I hear Judge Pratt speak, I more and more parallels between her life and my life. They always tend to shine through. I am also from a background of mixed parents. My mother is Puerto Rican, born and raised in Washington Heights. So she's a New Yorican, we like to call them. And my father is born and raised in El Salvador, and he grew up during the wartime. And so most of his life, all of his life, I should say, here in his country was full of strife and war and probably the most gruesome stories you will ever hear. And my father has no education, no formal education. He never learned how to read or write in English or in Spanish until he was a grown adult. And my mother graduated high school and had some college courses, but unfortunately was never able to fulfill a degree. And growing up, they instilled education as being my way out, my way of making something of myself, of becoming a success. And so I always knew education was really important. And when I was growing up, people always used to tell me like, "Oh, you're smart. You're so smart." But I just never believed it. I was always one of those people that I knew I wanted to be a lawyer at a young age. I didn't know why. I just saw them as being really strong-willed, intelligent people. And that's kind of what I wanted to emulate in my life and in my career. But I never thought that was possible. And it was always one of those things like, oh, you never see women like me. You never see Latinas playing lawyers on TV. And that's all I ever knew of lawyers. And so I definitely was filled and clouded with a lot of doubts. And one of those pivotal moments in my life was meeting Judge Pratt and speaking to Judge Pratt. And she really, it was a pivotal moment from adolescence to adulthood, but also in my personal life and also in my career. And so every time I talk to Judge Pratt, we have more in common, and there's more to talk about, and there's more to learn about each other. And it's, for me, is always such a wonderful experience. And here I am. I grew up somewhat in Washington Heights, mainly in New Jersey, and I went to Montclair State I went to public school my whole life. I'm a public institution kind of girly. I went to public schools. I went to Montclair State, and now I'm here at Rutgers Law. And I feel like when I first met Judge Pratt, one of the things that she was talking about was full circle moments. And all of these things in my life had led me to that meeting point of meeting her again. And it was all of these full circle moments, and it accumulates, and it really fosters confidence, because you know that I'm meant to be here and I'm meant to be in this place in my life so I can have the career that I want to have, because I am capable. I'm smart. I don't need to see Latinas play lawyers on TV. I can be a lawyer in real life.
Right. Mm-hmm. That's excellent. Well, Bianca, your story is truly inspirational too. And we're so fortunate to have you here at Rutgers Law School. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you met Judge Pratt?
Yes. So I was actually an undergrad, and I ended up in municipal court in Judge Pratt's courtroom. And I went with my mother, and that was the first time I'd ever been in court, and I was so nervous, and my mom was nervous, and we both were, we were scared because we've never had to deal with anything in the legal system. And now I'm standing in front of a judge, and I'm a young woman, and I don't know what I'm doing, and I'm trying my best to look professional and sound professional. And I am in Judge Pratt's courtroom, and she's asking me about myself, and she asked me, well, young lady, what do you want to do with your life? What do you want to be when you grow up? And I say, well, I want to be a lawyer. And that was one of those points in my life where I wanted it, but I didn't know how to achieve it, and I didn't know if I was capable of it. And after a little bit of a stern talking to, Judge Pratt tells me, well, if you want to be a lawyer, you need to get yourself together. You need to get yourself together because you can do it. You can do it. You can become a lawyer. You just need to fix the things in your life that are happening now, and then you can become a lawyer, and there won't be any stopping you. And Judge Pratt, and I thanked her, and she asked me who was I here with today, and I said, oh, well, I'm here with my mother. And she turns to my mom and says, Miss, I thank you for coming in with your child, and thank you for being here today. We don't see a lot of parents support their children, and so when we do, we have to thank them, because without your support, these things that she wants to obtain will be extremely difficult. And so my mom was just so honored that she had been recognized, and my mom is the biggest support in my life. And so for her to get that recognition was very special to both of us.
That's so moving to hear you tell that story. And it's wonderful to hear that you each have had an impact in each other's lives.
If I could, I'm so sorry,
yes,
Dean
please.
Bond,
but go right ahead, Judge Pratt.
It's like such an emotion. I'm laughing because we are experiencing a moment again. And oftentimes this is why you have to do what you're called to do, no matter what, no matter how difficult it looks, no matter what's happening, stay focused on the gold. Because I remember her very clearly. And I remember asking her and looking at her sternly. I wanted her to be afraid, And I said to her, what are you going to do with your life? And when she said, I want to be a lawyer, I remember people in the audience laughed. And they laughed because they're like, but she's in court. And, it's always the naysayers who push you the furthest, but not even fully understanding that this is the person who changes the trajectory of her entire family's life. Like, that's what I know. And that's who she was. And seeing people as salvageable, she came to me for something silly, but why it's so important. And then so to fully understand and to fully have someone express how they experienced you, when I was just focused on she gets to do what she needs to do in life, and I have an obligation to her because God sent her to my court. Like, she ends up here with me I have an obligation to her. And sometimes in my book, you'll see there's points where I start talking to God and I'm like, why would you send this person here? What could I possibly do for them? And it's that. So for me, it just reminds me of even the days that it's difficult to shift institutions, but institutions are people, right? So it's not a building that I'm trying to shift. I'm not trying to shift a criminal justice. I'm not trying to shift the building, the edifice. I'm trying to shift people who work in spaces. And every time someone gets a second chance, how that reverberates in the world and what they end up doing. So I didn't want it lost. That, and then she's like, awesome. And you're sitting there and you're like, wow, I'm sorry I had to meet all this awesomeness this way, but that you really never know the impact that you have, but you still have to do the work that you're called to do.
Right. Right. Thank you so much for that insight, Judge Pratt. And it starts, I think, with seeing the humanity in every single person who comes before you in court.
Yes.
So such a wonderful, wonderful story. And Bianca, if I may, can you tell us a little bit about why you chose Rutgers and why you chose to join the MSP program?
Yeah, so I chose Rutgers for a few reasons. One of them being I have always lived in New Jersey my whole life, and Rutgers being one of two institutions, law schools here in New Jersey. Not only I did look outside in other places, but I definitely wanted to stay close to home. I knew going into law school that I was going to need that support of my family, and so I wanted to stay somewhere where I could have that support and have those people to tap into when I needed that extra push on those days that were extra tough. And so that was one reason, but also the MSP program. Where I grew up, there was not a lot of people of color. There was maybe two people of Hispanic backgrounds, maybe three Black people, and maybe one or two Asian people. So growing up, I knew what it felt like to be excluded from a lot of things. And when I went to undergrad, my undergrad institution was very, very diverse. And that was the first time that I had professors of color, that I had seen deans of color, that I had seen all of these professionals of color. And so in choosing Rutgers, I knew that I had to choose a place that was a diverse community because I knew what it felt like to not be in a diverse community. And for me, I did not want to go back. Another thing was in undergrad, I'm a first generation everything. So that's what I like to say, first generation everything. And in undergrad, I didn't know that there were programs like the EOF. So I didn't tap into them because if you don't know, how can you apply for them? And so having that knowledge into law school, I knew I needed a program that was like EOF, that supported first generation, low income, people of minority backgrounds. And so I found that in MSP. And when I looked into MSP and the history and the wonderful professionals that have been able to come out of MSP, for me, it was a no-brainer. And I'm very grateful for MSP, and that's how I reconnected with Judge Pratt during my 1L year. MSP was promoting a book talk. And I look at the email and I see the flyer and I see Judge Pratt's face and I see her name and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's Judge Pratt, that's my judge. And I see the date and it's on my mom's birthday. And I say, okay, come on, Mom, let's go. We have to go to this talk. So I bring my mom to the book talk and Judge Pratt is talking about full circle moments. She's reading an excerpt from her book and she's talking about all of these full circle moments in her life. And so I kindly go up to her after the talk, and me and my mom are listening to her, and we're both crying. And I go up to the talk, and I'm like, "Hi, Judge Pratt. You may not remember me, but my name is Bianca, and this is our story, and this is how I first met you. And it's an honor to reconnect with you, and it's an honor to be here at your law school and a part of your minority program." Because obviously, when I first met her, I didn't know what law school she went to. I didn't know that she was in the MSP, and so for me, that was a full circle moment.
Absolutely.
That was fully full circle. And I know that the 1Ls this year had the honor of listening to Judge Pratt during their orientation. And so I had gone to the orientation as a 2L just to hear Judge Pratt speak. She knows every time she comes to the law school, I'll be the first one first one in the audience. They're waiting for her
You
to
and I
talk.
both. Yes, absolutely.
And so during the 1L orientation, she's talking about, last year, a student came up to her and introduced herself and told her this story of her time on the bench and how this student was going to change the world, and how my words to her were so transitional and so they were transitional, inspiring to her, but in reality, her words every time she speaks are inspiring and transitional for me. And so that was another one of those full circle moments of like, I reconnected her with her last year, and now again at an MSP event, and here she is talking about me to all of these students. And it really was one of those moments where it's like, just again, tears. But it was very beautiful, emotional moment for me.
It sounds like it. That is an incredible moment. And Judge Pratt, what was going through your mind when you reconnected with Bianca at the book talk?
I don't know how many times you get people so emotional on the podcast.
Not
But
enough.
It was confirmation. It was really, it's like being doing a relay race. And I get to that last leg and I'm exhausted. This work is hard, and getting people to do the right thing and watching people suffer, and knowing that there's only one of you, and that you really are trying to, build up an army or just equip people so that they can go out in their own corners of the world in the marketplace. And I was tired. Literally, I was just in a space that I was just like, wow, okay, what else can I do? And then I speak to her and I was like, okay, I'm so ungrateful because I need to be in a space of gratitude that I get to experience this young person, that I got to touch them in some way. And I got, and I got stopped feeling sorry for myself because I was tired and got back to work. Like it's always that. It's about you're tired, you're frustrated, but get back to work. And so she really gave me the fuel in that space, and I was just so grateful. I went from, being inward and just being so grateful to being able to be in a space where you get to touch people along their travel. Just it. And so that's what it was like, to see her mom. And I was watching, I don't know why, I just kept noticing her mom was just smiling so hard during my talk. And then I just went over and I'm like, wow, this is why you don't always know what you do. You just stay focused on the mission and keep doing it. So
Right.
that was a great gift for me. That was truly a great gift and a reminder and a confirmation for me.
That's wonderful. And in Bianca's words, really a true full circle moment. That's just
Yes.
beautiful to hear about. So, Judge Pat, your advocacy and leadership have taken you all over the world now. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about what you're doing now.
So I am running an organization called Odyssey Impact, and it's been an organization that's been around for a while, and we're just transitioning into a grant funding model around social justice issues. But what I also do through my consulting is that I do judges trainings. I work with jurisdictions, I work with criminal justice reformers, I work with prosecutors and officers, and anything that touches the system, and trying to find ways of improving how we deliver justice. And so, it's amazing when I get a call and I'm like, can you come to Scotland? And I'm like, really? And I go to Scotland and we do a junket there and we visit the juvenile facilities and I meet with the judges and I talk about the things that I do and some of the things that they might consider in their system, because they're really trying to figure out how to make their system more just. And I come home and maybe 7 months later, I get an email saying, thanks to the junket, the juvenile judges now have to consider rehabilitation as a part of their decision making when sentencing. Now, obviously, it's not just me, but that again, I get to be a part of this process. It's going to Dubai and talking to judges about returning and restoring humanity to our processes and why it's important. And judges saying, yes, I feel this way. I feel like there's something more than just procedurally processing cases that I need to do. It's going to New Mexico 4 times to train and to have people respond like, wow, I went back and did, or Colorado, when judges are like, oh yeah, my judge does everything you do. And the judge is like, yeah, I saw you at a training in San Francisco and I went back and did everything you talk about. And it's changed how I feel about judging. I now impact people's lives. And this is all I want to do. Like, I didn't realize that I could exercise more than just what I'd been doing. And so much of that. So still looking for more ways to impact the justice system. Even I go I go to prisons and I laugh. In my book, I talk in The Power of Dignity. I talk about how my husband's like, yeah, you should go. And I'm like, absolutely not. I'm not going to the prison. And then I go there because I really want to speak holistically about justice and the impact on talking to people who are in prison on long sentences. What could you have done? When did it change? What would have meant the difference? You know, and getting them excited. I go back and they're like, I called and I told the folks back home about what you talked about here. And I'm like, wow, really? And so really looking at how we can all change. And some of the things I talk a lot about procedural justice, but it's applicable throughout all fields. So it's not just about restoring humanity to the criminal justice system, but wherever you are in the marketplace, if you're an accountant, you need to be thinking about how you treat the people who come to you for help. If you are a teacher, how do you engage the students in a way that they feel that they still have maintained their dignity and respect as they've gone through these processes of being engaged with you? So doing a lot, and that's probably why I'm tired.
Yes, that would explain it. But it must be so validating to hear how you've had real impact in people's lives through this work. It's such important work.
It is, to hear Bianca talk about her mom's reaction to being in court, because I always treated the court like my living room. So if you came to court, I got to talk to you. And, if mom came, then we had to have a conversation, because the conversation is about, we as a team are now going to help this person through this process. And what that means, that we are now, and sometimes I remember mom and dad came and I would ask the son a question and mom would answer. And the dad kept giving mom these cross eyes. And I had to say at one point, ma'am, stop talking and stop. And I had to ask her, I said, why is it every time I ask your son a question, your lips move and your husband gives you dirty looks? And so this is the whole process of what's going on in this family.
Right.
And we
Right.
needed to address this so that the dad felt empowered to be a part of the process of helping his son, come out of what it was they were, and that mom also stopped making excuses for the son. So the judge really just had to call her out so that she noticed, like, just stop for a second. And so I laugh when I hear that, her mother had her response to me talking to her, because I'm like, yeah, I talked to everybody in the courtroom.
That's great. What is your ultimate career goal?
It feels like finding more platforms to further my message, to ensure more justice, to ensure more people are engaged in the process, touching young minds. I also taught at Rutgers Law School, and seeing those students go into the world really armed well to go in and fight injustice anywhere that they are, whether it's in politics, whether it's in corporate America, whether it's in the nonprofit space. So really just creating bigger platforms for myself to really be able to have an impact, and having other folks go out and change the world. So when I decide to finally retire, which I don't imagine will be anytime soon,
I hope
but,
not.
but I think in terms of career goals, just sharing the message more broadly, and really getting people trained to take on some of these fights. One of the things that's been exciting is seeing young police officers, or rookies as they call them, in Newark stop me and say, oh, I saw your talk. Thank you for those tools, because they're using my TED Talk as a training tool in the police academy. And so for
Wow.
me, I'm like, wow, that's it's not what I envisioned. It's not something that I thought, but it's something that they now have that they're like, this is another thing that I can add to my toolbox. And it's helping them do their jobs more effectively.
Right. And it's having an exponential impact because you know that all of those folks that you're helping to train are then going out and helping to train others. And so that's
Absolutely.
really an incredible thing.
Absolutely.
And so my last question is really one seeking for students who may be interested in going to law school. What advice would you give those students about the process and their consideration of law school as a next step?
Well, the first thing I would tell them is to stop talking themselves out of it. If you are thinking about it and the idea of it excites you, I would ask you, but you're afraid, I would ask you to ask yourself two questions. What would I do if I didn't have to worry about money or what people might say? And
Great advice.
if you would still say practice law, then do that. Because if we don't serve folks, who will? We don't serve them, who will? And the process, once you are in the process, you find ways to overcome the obstacles that you are only thinking about now as you talk yourself out of it.
Right.
You realize you're stronger and smarter than you are.
That's wonderful. Well, that's important advice to remember if you're a prospective student. Well, this has been such an inspiration to everyone. So thank you, Judge Pratt. Thank you, Bianca, for joining us. I can't wait to listen to your next talk at the law school. So we'll have to have you back soon. And thanks again for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Bianca.
Thank you, Team Bond.
The Power of Attorney is a production of Rutgers Law School. With 2 locations just minutes from New York City and Philadelphia, Rutgers Law offers the prestige and reputation of a large, nationally known university with a personal, small campus experience. Learn more today by visiting us at law.rutgers.edu.